Hey everybody, how are you? It's Dr. Cruz from Healing Out Loud. Today is Talk About It Tuesday, and I'm very excited about it, as I am every week, because I really enjoy making these videos. I want to start off by encouraging you all to find a purpose greater than yourself to dedicate your extra time to. We spend a lot of time checking out, watching TV and reading newspapers and listening to the news, and it's not really contributing to anything greater than yourself. So I just want to encourage you to spend time with your spirit, figure out what it is that you were put here on earth to do. For me, I know instinctively that Healing Out Loud was made specifically for me. I truly can't imagine anyone else on earth doing Healing Out Loud. Like it belongs to me. You know what I mean? It was an idea created just for me. And you have something that was made just for you to do while you're here on earth. And so I just want to encourage you to be open. Be open to receiving the inspiration, the idea. You know what I mean? Okay, so chapter 2, my past no longer haunts me, and neither should yours, right? We can't stay in the past. We can't let the past control us forever. For some people, it's a lifelong fight, right? But don't give up. You got to hang in there, okay? Every day things get better. Every day we get smarter. If we do the work, we must do the work, okay? You can't get around it. Because if you try to avoid doing the work, what happens is the negative consequence or the pain shows up in a different area of your life, okay? And ultimately, it's physical illness. So if you avoid addressing something in your life because you don't want to deal with the drama of it all, you're probably going to end up getting headaches later, get depressed maybe. So you don't want to avoid handling things. What you want to do is handle them as early as possible and as smart as possible and as quickly as possible and get it out of your life, okay? All right, we don't want it to linger forever. So, my past no longer haunts me, and neither should yours. The past is behind. Learn from it. The future is ahead. Prepare for it. The present is here. Live it. 22 years after being released from foster care, I now find myself waking up every morning with a divine awareness of the road I've traveled. There's urgency in my soul to accomplish so much, but as I look back on past opportunities, I'm faced with the haunting reality of all I've squandered. Oh, the feeling of regret that pulls at my heartstrings. It's full of pain. But I know I must continue to recreate new success stories for myself despite all I've lost. Or else the alternative is for me to remain a victim of my past. My brother, our sister, and I grew up in foster care, and later each of us at various intervals lived on the streets. For most of my life, my father had been a recovering drug addict and my mother an alcoholic. Needless to say, our early lives were screwed up tremendously. And still today, we continue to suffer the residual consequences. You see, the effects of being left uneducated about our experiences, unloved, abused, and unsupervised for most of our lives doesn't just go away because we turn 18, 26, or even 40. These consequences and the learned fears and behaviors become a part of our being. Remember that physiology I was telling y'all about? The programming? Yes, there are some things that we can learn over the years and some behaviors we can change. But at the core of our existence, the damage has already shaped our physiological responses and cognitive abilities, which sometimes never become completely healthy again. I can retrospectively see the beginning of many of my struggles in my life. Never having been taught sufficiently the art of loving myself, much less proper decision-making skills combined with a complete lack of family stability. All of these have been the cause of much of my mental displacement throughout the many stages of my life. I endured a lifelong disbelief in my inherent ability to go into the world and blaze a path of my own. My harrowing beginnings taught me what overwhelming loneliness felt like, and my non-existent family structure preceded my lack of identity. My life has been a chaotic mess as a direct result of my parents' inability to properly raise me, as all children need to be raised. My siblings and I continue to suffer the consequences of not having healthy parents. Even now in our 40s, we continue to suffer in certain aspects from having moved from foster home to foster home, being abused, beaten, and ridiculed by the same people who told the government they would care for us, wanting a place to call home. I'm aware today, due to my current insight, that much of our suffering continued into our adulthood for quite a few specific reasons. One reason was the unhealthy defense mechanisms we adopted for our survival. Another reason my personal suffering continued was because my mind eventually learned how to block out much of what had harmed me, to the point where I had succumbed to complete mental seclusion due to years of learned fear and feelings of hopelessness. I had no idea how to fix my life, so I consciously and unconsciously hid from it. The most damaging of all reasons why my life became such a chaotic mess is because I did not have a support system to instill strength in me. From the time that I was born, I was never provided the infrastructure needed to help me build me into the self-confident person I needed to become in order to escape the surrounding torment that ripped me apart piece by piece every day of my life. I did not have not one person in my life I felt I could go to for help. You have to remember, I was 7 through 12 when I was in foster care, and I didn't have any family. So who was I going to go to for help? My brother and I had been split up in foster care. Probably the second year I was in foster care. No one saved me in foster care, and no one saved me from myself when I later became the primary reason for my own self-destruction. I was doomed from the start as a child living in the projects of New York City's Lower East Side with drug and alcohol-addicted parents because I didn't even know what I didn't even know. That's so critical to understand, not only for me in this instance, but maybe for you in your life, or maybe for somebody in your life that complains a lot. You know, they don't know what they don't know. And so for us, sometimes we expect people to get on the ball and figure it out. But for them, they don't know how to do that. So we need to help teach them. Okay? How could I prepare for my future when I had no idea what it was I needed to do in order to prepare for my future? This is the kind of thing a supportive family is supposed to help children with. The value of a support system is incontrovertible. It would have offered me the external stimulus and safe environment I needed in order to find my own strength and inner voice, instead of feeling desolate while hiding and running from my abuser's shadows. You know, can I take a moment to highlight that? I say that I needed a supportive family because they would have provided a safe environment for me to find my own strength. That is the same for every child. Every single child, they need that safe environment and that support of a family. That's why they cling to their friends, because their friends are very supportive. They may not always be smart and lead them in the right direction, but it's a sense of support that they have and of safety where they can just be who they are. A support system would have offered me an environment in which I could have bounced ideas off people who loved me and had my best interest at heart. But there was no support system for me, and there was no hugs of encouragement. There was no embracement or safe zone that I could come back to. A few hugs over the years would have made an enormous difference in my life. They would have been priceless to me. I believe hugs are very undervalued these days, but in essence, they are actually an essential part of the gateway to a child's healing. That feeling of being loved, understood, and safe in someone's arms where no one could ever hurt me again was exactly what I needed as a child who lived life in an environment where I was laughed at and made to feel rejected and unvalued. And that sense of rejection and unvalued and laughed at, turned into maybe talked about, never left me. I felt that way my entire life. Things that happen in our childhood affect us in our adulthood. Many people try to ignore it, push it to the side, pretend it doesn't exist. And then they sometimes suffer physical illness from ignoring it or other struggles. And some people don't know how to deal with it. And so they become drinkers or substance abusers and things like that. We have to come to peace with it, and we have to reframe it. Okay, getting a therapist to help you find new meaning for your history is very, very important. Escaping one hell for another. After my life in foster care and then years of bouncing around from one friend's house to another while homeless, I finally joined the Navy as a naive 19-year-old. At first, it was exciting. I was on my own finally to take control of my life, or so I thought, until I arrived at boot camp, where they immediately showed me I had no control over anything. Still. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I hated being in the military because, again, I found myself completely powerless. Stuck in a contract with the government for 4 years seemed like a lifetime to me. Day in and day out, I wept as I faced the loneliness and isolating feeling of being beat down by life. Just as I had felt as that 7-year-old child sitting in the tub being beaten. What was I thinking joining the military? I suppose I wasn't really thinking at all. I was still running. Running from a life I had never processed. My traumas from foster care, my grandfather molesting me, my lack of support system, me being robbed at knife point, feelings of rejection my entire life, and the abandonment I felt when my mother died from being shot in her head. These all kept me from taking control of my life. My mind was shattered in boot camp and later plagued with trying to understand how I ended up in yet another environment that seemed equally abusive and demeaning as everything I had already experienced since birth. I quickly realized I was screwed. There was no way out of the military. This was going to be my new life. My company commander calling me a whore because I wore red lipstick. Other instructors yelling and screaming in my face. Telling me I was worthless. Throwing my uniform across the room after I just folded them perfectly for the last hour. And then pulling off my bed sheets after I struggled to make the hospital corners perfect in preparation for the military inspection. All of this slowly destroyed what little was left of who I thought I was. What the hell did I get myself into? I cried as I sat behind my bunk, hoping no one would see me. Maybe To the average person, this is an environment they can handle. But to me, it was like reliving a different form of my history all over again. Upon arriving to A school, I quickly found solace in partying and drinking. That's what everyone else was doing. We were all young and in the military. It was expected. It was cultural. And I didn't know any better because no one had taught me any better. There I was, 19 years old, taking a bottle of 151 Bacardi to the head and drinking until I reached my blackout stage. The days following all the drinking, I often could not recall anything from the night before. I suppose I did all I knew to do during that time, which was live a life in a separate, deluded existence, hoping to escape everything that was me. Living in my own lives. How many of us do that? We lie to ourselves. We're such good liars, aren't we? We're like, oh, that doesn't bother me. I can tolerate him. I'm happy. I like my job. All right. We do what we got to do, right? To manage. But we need to know. We need to be honest. You know what I mean? We need to be honest. While I was experiencing this struggle in my life, my brother spent decades of his own life devastated and angry at both of our parents for abandoning us and not loving us and not teaching us basic life skills so that we could have a fighting chance at living a productive life. He was angry at them, and rightfully so. But unlike him, I learned to forgive our parents and our other abusers rather quickly. I never really held a grudge against anyone. And that worked for me. Eventually, though, I realized that neither my brother nor I had approached our circumstances completely right. I saw how his pain and anger and resentment blocked him from living an abundant life and from living up to his God-given full potential. I suffered too, only my suffering came from the domination of fear, not anger. My soul cries when I think of my brother because he really could have contributed to society in such astonishing ways had he had been taught how to harness his powers and use them more productively. He is brilliant on so many levels, far more brilliant than I, but he used his ego as a self-defense mechanism. It provided him with the awesome belief in himself he so desperately needed to survive his physical and mental abuse, along with living homeless and on the streets of New York City. Y'all know what it's like to live on the streets of New York City in the 80s? It wasn't easy. That's when 42nd Street was all prostitution and drugs. It wasn't like it is now. They cleaned up New York a lot. There's a lot of shenanigans going on in the streets. A lot of robberies, a lot of fights, a lot of gangs, a lot of everything. This distorted thinking, though, led him into a world that blocked him from his own reality. He learned to live his life, oftentimes self-destructive in nature, which kept him from facing his own demons. You see, in trying to survive the trauma that he and I both knew so well, we didn't realize we couldn't cheat God, even though God wasn't really real to us for a long time. And to play by the devil's rules? Well, either way, we only continued to unknowingly hurt ourselves. I eventually realized that we were the only ones believing the lies we had created. These lies protected us from the abuse we endured. But others could see what we were really turning into. Later, I realized we had fallen victim to denial and blame. Those of us who lie to ourselves, even for self-preservation, often choose unconsciously to live deep and that protective state in order to believe that we are not as inadequate as our spirit knows we are. But to consider the alternative would have meant we had to acknowledge the reality of how broken we really were. Many people feel that, this is not in the book, but many people feel that if you acknowledge how broken you are, that that's a weakness. And as a therapist, I have a different perspective. My perspective is that when you face what it is that you need to face head on, with the proper support and guidance, like a therapist can give you, then you are able to move through that thing, that state, that emotion, that stage of life that has made you feel so broken, so that you can finally give it new meaning, see it with new eyes. I am not a child anymore. And, when I wrote this book, I wasn't a child. And I was able, in the years prior to me writing this book, when I was doing my work, my therapy work, to resolve my emotions about it all, I was not a child. So the perspective that I had on the things I was addressing came from an adult perspective. And I was able to see it, understand it, analyze it, reframe it, and do different things with it from an adult perspective. There's nothing to fear about readdressing something from your history or, in your household right now that is stealing life from you. Because you only have one life. You are here right now. And we never know the day that our date with destiny will show up, right? And so we can either choose to live in a lie and suffer consciously or unconsciously, because you can't escape what it is you're trying to ignore. And people really need to get that. If you're depressed, if you're sad, if you're lonely, if you're hurt, if you're living in regret, whatever it is, it must be readdressed, reformatted, and then filed away, just like on a computer, so that it doesn't have power over us. Because even if we consciously block it out, it subconsciously affects us in one way or another. It doesn't just disappear. It just doesn't. All right. My brother reacted with rage. This is my last page. As I look back on the past, I realized that I too had my own issues with seeing life as it really was. In fact, for much of my life, I felt assured. I thought I was okay because I had always taken great pride in knowing I was not going to let my parents' actions and lack of concern for us hold me back in life. I decided a long time ago I wouldn't use their failures as an excuse for my struggles. Not while they were alive, and surely not after they had passed away. I saw how placing blame on them was affecting my brother, and I refused to let that happen to me. Even at 40 years old, my brother suffered from the memories of his childhood. It was as if I could actually see the spiritual manifestation of his rage when I looked into his beautiful eyes. You can see, if you look into people's eyes, you can see what's going on in their spirit if you pay attention. I looked into his beautiful eyes, witnessing the same demonic energy I felt surrounded his strong body language. The world forced him to become a survivor at all costs, for had he not, his pain would have kept him a victim that he was when he was a little boy in foster homes, being dragged up and down the hallway by his hair. Unfortunately, in the process, his detachment from certain realities had taken over. So we detach sometimes to manage the moment, but we have to do things right on an emotional level, or else We don't address the things we need to address, and then they show up again in the future, okay? Some emotionally damaged spirits take on the survival of the fittest attitude, while others take on what's called eat or be eaten. However we identify it, my brother transformed himself into a very powerful person, but his power was coming from a very negative place, anger, that had infiltrated his thought processes and created very destructive ideologies and survival techniques, which all seemed to stem from being an abused and abandoned little child, having no one to trust and nowhere to go to feel safe. He was left with nothing but his will to survive and the sad truth that he only had himself to depend on. I, on the other hand, found peace in my ability to forgive people for their wrongdoings in order to preserve my spirit and prevent, to the best of my ability, any blockings of my future blessings. Or so I thought. I did everything I could to ensure other people's sicknesses and their abuse against me, like my grandfather molesting me, would not keep me in a mental state of victimization as I viewed abuse had done to my brother. Today I realized, despite my best efforts, I was a victim, but in a very different way. The forgiveness I extended to my abusers really was not enough to heal me. Sure, I had been emotionally free to live life without negative excuses and finger pointing. I had forgiven everyone who had ever beaten, abused, or neglected me when I was younger. I forgave my father for leaving me with his father, who molested me. I forgave another man who I vaguely remember, but still envision, for putting his hands under my dress and letting his fingers find their way under my panties to a place they never should have been. I also forgave my mother for not being able to get her life together in time to protect me before she allegedly shot herself in the head, or as some believe, was murdered by her then boyfriend. But now that I've experienced adulthood, I realize forgiving was only half the remedy. It wasn't the only thing I needed to do to help create a healthy life for myself. So I'm going to end there for now. And, it definitely was a journey, right? I'm still on the journey. I'm still discovering who it is I'm supposed to be in life. And some of those struggles from my youth still linger, right? Because they're subconscious. I've been programmed throughout my life, specifically because I spent 20 years in the military. And so that fear was reinforced in my mind. Had I not spent the 20 years in the military, maybe it wouldn't have been reinforced. I don't know. We can't predict what an alternative life would have been, right? So my past doesn't haunt me any longer, and neither should yours. The reason I titled it that is because when we do the work, the therapeutic work, when we go back and address the things that we need to address, talk about the pain that we need to talk about, first of all, you got to get with the right person, because unfortunately, everybody doesn't care about our story. They just don't, especially in today's day and age. I find it very rude, actually. I'm a bit of a judgmental person sometimes, but I find it very rude that people are so freaking selfish, But if you understand why people are the way they are in society today, the I guess predominant message on social media is, be beautiful, get your coin, get your man. Your life isn't what it's supposed to be if you don't have your coin, if you don't have your man, if you don't look the best, and everybody is on this hamster wheel, to get their coin, to get their money, to get their thing in life, right? And they don't want any negativity. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to deal with it. You're either on board with their program or you're not. And I can respect that. You have to be able to respect that because they're focused. They're not therapists, right? So I'm open to things such as talking about healing out loud, talking about emotions, talking about our options, talking about what happens when we don't deal with it, talking about the different brain waves that we have and the neuroscience behind why we respond emotionally and why we're affected physiologically, how the brain communicates with the rest of the body, because that's what I've studied all my life, right? I am a therapist. I have done the work on myself. I didn't just go to school for it, but I am the example of what it is that I'm talking about, right? These other people in society, that's not their spiel. Their spiel is they're doing what they're doing, whether it's an online business, an entrepreneurial endeavor, real estate, Facebook advertising, online coaching, whatever it is that they're doing. They want positive people focused on positivity. So when we are in a state of emotional turmoil, or we need help, or we need to talk about our feelings, or whatever the issue is, you got to know not to look for help from them, because that's not their lane, right? So in order not to feel alone when you're trying to figure out how it is that you too cannot let your history haunt you or your past haunt you, you have to know to seek the people who are in the lane that you are in, that are open to listening to you and helping you. And sometimes, just like it's hard for entrepreneurs to find people sometimes to encourage them and understand their conversation, it's also hard sometimes for people who are in pain and want to work through some things in their life, because it's a very lonely place. Everybody's not open about it. Everybody's not vulnerable. That is one of my gifts. I'm a very vulnerable, open, honest, and vulnerable person. I don't have any secrets in my life. And I open it up to the public because what I realize is that we have a society of people that don't. No one opens it up. No one talks about what it is like to heal. What am I supposed to do with my problems, with my mess? How do I fix it? How do I help myself? And there's a lot of people that don't have access to those kinds of resources that can help them. So my point is this chapter is called "My Past No Longer Haunts Me, and Neither Should Yours." And in order for it not to haunt you, you have to do the emotional work. You have to do the cognitive work. You have to get the therapy. You have to get the coaching. You have to figure out how to move the pieces of the puzzle of your life around and give it new meaning and all this kind of thing. And if you're looking for that emotional support and guidance from the average person, you may come up frustrated because the average person may not be interested or capable, right? Not just interested, but they are not even capable. They don't know, maybe, So I encourage you to stay focused, stay hopeful, use your journal. When you have no one in life, you always have God, and you always have your journal, because the answers truly are inside of you. The point of the education and the therapy and the therapist and the coach and all this kind of thing is that they are there to help teach you how to do it quicker. Life is a journey. It truly is a journey. Okay? So stay in prayer, stay focused, get your journal out, and find you a therapist. You can look on my website if you like, capricruz.com, and decide what it is that you want to do with your life. Decide, figure out, ask yourself, what is it about your life you need to resolve? And what are you willing to do to resolve it, to get it over with, so that you can move on and create the life that you were called to live? Now that, when you find your purpose and you work your calling, you might end up on the East China Sea like me. This is how I got here. I followed my calling, right? So this is Dr. Cruz from Healing Out Loud. And next week, I will finish up with chapter 2, and then we'll move on to chapter 3. Okay? Have a nice week, you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.